So, we've defined capitalism. We've outlined some arguments for capitalism. But if you know anything about the real way that the actual world works, you might be saying, I feel like we might have missed something here. You know, you've described this almost magical form of capitalism where supply and demand interact to determine these prices that convey information. I feel like we're missing something. I feel like this may not be the whole picture for how capitalism works in the real world. You're exactly right. There's a little bit more going on here. And today, one of the perhaps criticisms of real world capitalism, not just theoretical capitalism, is cronyism or crony capitalism. So what is this all about? It's deals between private interests, so businesses, social groups, unions, professional groups, and the government that, quote unquote, pick winners and losers based on political influence with the government rather than based on merit. So, what sorts of things does this include? Cash subsidies to certain businesses or industries, tax preferences for specific industries or different actions within the economy, appropriations and contracts, trade protections for certain industries. Maybe you want a tariff to protect your industry so that you don't have to compete with foreign companies, things like that. And there's a pretty good amount of research that shows that this is going to slow economic growth. And obviously this whole idea of perhaps, more or less for a better word, schmoozing or bribing, politicians to get some kickbacks and preferential treatment from the government, well, that doesn't really sound like this very radical free market capitalism that we've defined in our previous lectures, right? So maybe there's a little bit more going on to real world capitalism than our kind of pie in the sky definition of capitalism would allow for. And maybe the scale of the cronyism or of the relationships between government and private interest is relevant. So in a small town, when we ask, who's going to pave or who's going to fix this road, well, there's really not that many people. There might just be one company that's available to come fix this road, or maybe there's two. Well, okay, there's two companies. And one of them is, the owner of one company is cousins with the mayor. Well, I think I know who might have a better shot at getting this contract to fix the road. How do we give out jobs in our very small community? Are they going to go to, who are these jobs going to go to? The person with the most merit? Maybe. Or maybe they go to, whoever's related to the people that are already in power, whoever's connected to these people. If you're from a small town, you probably see stuff like this all the time. It's very common. And maybe it's not wrong. Maybe it's not wrong to say, hey, we are the people that were elected to run this community, and when we decide how best to run it, we want people that have a vested interest, a communal connection to this small town, to this community. What's wrong with that? Maybe nothing. Maybe it's some biased preferential treatment in the economy. Maybe that creates inefficiencies. I'll leave it up to you to think about. Maybe cronyism is a little grosser or perhaps just different in some way once you take it out of the small town and apply it to the country. So this massive country the size of a continent with, 330 million people in it? Whoa! Yeah, that's a way different scale than the small town where everybody knows each other, right? Well, when, famously, as we'll talk about a little later in the course, Troubled Asset Relief Program, TARP, following the 07-08 financial crisis. You got the government stepping in to bail out banks that maybe made some shoddy loans, some suspect loans that maybe they shouldn't have engaged in. Well, right after that, there were a whole lot of people upset in the country. And I think this is something that really doesn't get talked about enough. There were two reactions to the government's actions in 08. And really they had a lot in common. There was the Occupy Wall Street on the left side of things that, these kind of generally young people went out and camped out outside Wall Street and said, this is rigged, this is unfair, this is wrong. All this money is going to these banks. And the banks were in the wrong, at least in part, in what happened in 07, 08. As we'll talk about later in the class, a little teaser, we'll talk more about the financial crisis. Well, the Tea Party, as this was this big right-wing movement, kind of around that same time period. Some people called it the taxed enough already party. Of course, the original Boston Tea Party having also to do with taxes, of course, import taxes on tea. And what they were saying was, look, you're going to tax us like crazy just to give this money to places that these folks didn't feel was justified. Oh my, it happened. They kind of rhyme a little bit. You kind of hear an echo. This is about as far right and as far left a group as you can get, the Tea Party and the Occupy Wall Street people. They probably don't agree on just about anything. But when you ask their opinion on cronyism, on this relationship between government money and private corporations, they would have a lot in common, and they'd have a lot to agree on. And I think that's pretty interesting. One of the problems with cronyism, though, is there some other way to do it? Is it possible to have government that steps in to the marketplace and intervenes to build roads, provide national defense, provide a police force and a fire department? If we're going to have all that stuff, how are we going to have it without the government picking the winners, the people that are going to run the fire department, the people that get the contracts to build the roads, the people that get the money that comes from our building of Army and Navy war machines and weapons and all sorts of things? That is seriously big business. Well, all that money is going to somebody. How do we allocate that? Is there a way to separate? Is there a way for the government to do this in a just way that's not with preferential treatment? I don't know. I don't know if there's a really clear way to do that. Well, maybe you say, well, just give it to the lowest bidder. Give whoever can do it for the cheapest. Well, but would you do that if you were going to pick out a car or a t-shirt? Are you just going to buy the literal lowest priced option? No, you probably want to consider quality and stuff like that. This turns out to be a really hard thing to answer. So, yes, cronyism is a problem. I don't know that it's possible to separate a real-world capitalist country from cronyism. There's going to be some degree of cronyism. Maybe we have some way of limiting it. Perhaps. Maybe it's just kind of a nature of the beast sort of thing. All right.